Karen. Wow, thank you all for coming out. We may open a can of worms here at the Polybog. The first reading, and it's from the book Conversations with God, 2 Centuries of Prayers by African Americans, compiled by James Washington, Ph.D. And the first one was written in 1858 by Fanny Woods. It's called A Slave Mother's Doleful Prayer. We stopped at this boarding house. This was our first night stop after leaving Wilmington, Delaware. The keeper of the boarding house tried to buy Fanny Woods' baby, but there was a disagreement regarding price. About 5 the next morning, we started on. When we had gone about a half a mile, a colored boy came running down the road with a message from his master, and we were halted until his master came bringing a colored woman with him. And he bought the baby out of Fanny Woods' arms. As the colored woman was ordered to take it away, I heard Fanny Woods cry, "Oh God, I would rather hear the clods fall on the coffin lid of my child than to hear the cries because he's been taken away from me. Goodbye, child." We were ordered to move on. I could hear the crying of the child in the distance as it was borne away by the other woman. I could hear the deep sobs of a broken-hearted mother. We could hear the groans of many as they prayed for God to have mercy upon us and give us grace to endure the hard trials through which we must pass. The second, it's a short reading. It's by Dr. William Donald Watley. It was written in 1992. 1992. Oh God, I get so tired of racism wherever I go. Oh God, as a black man, I get exceedingly tired of so filled up with confronting and fighting racism, that formidable foe. It passes its poison from one generation to another. It has polluted all the wellspring of the nation's institutional life. More widespread than the drug scourge, more explosive than nuclear weapons, more crippling than germ warfare, racism has washed up on the shores of every nation, of every continent. Oh God, I get tired of racism wherever I go, abroad and at home, from stores that let me know that I have gotten out of place, from looks of fear that my black manly presence engenders in some small insults to major offenses, from polite, subtle, condescending paternalism or maternalism to outright open hostility, from insulting jokes about my intelligence to curiosity about alleged black sexual prowess, from characters and stereotypes to the "you are the exception" syndrome. Racism tears its many heads and racism rears its many heads and shows the various faces all the time. Yet, as I bow before you, O God, I pledge to you, to my ancestors who sacrificed greatly so that I might enjoy whatever rights and privileges, however limited or circumscribed. I know the greater is the one that is in me. May that Spirit's presence and power direct and inspire me now and evermore until victory is won for all my people and all people over the world, until the kingdom of this world becomes the kingdom of our Lord and that of Christ. Amen.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce our own Wava Osborne this morning, a wise woman with a passion for a responsible search for truth and meaning. Wava.
I don't know how wise I am, but anyway, I'll take it. I'll take it. You know, I really don't know where to begin with all that's gone on in the last 2 months, especially. It just breaks your heart. But I will start with the February 13th Bristol Herald Courier opinion page. And this is printed from the Roanoke Times. The title was, "Is Virginia's Sense of Racial Progress a Lie?" And I quote, "The best thing to come out of the blackface scandal that has engulfed Virginia is that it has forced us to confront our history, a history that in this case intrudes uncomfortably on the present." A few days later, on the opinion page, again in the Bristol Herald Courier from the Roanoke Times, Governor Northam, like many Virginians, was taught propaganda about slavery, and I quote, "From 1957 into the 70s, the official 7th grade history textbook was Virginia. History, government, geography. It was little more than state-sponsored propaganda designed to brainwash Virginia students about the state's history in general and racial matters in particular. In the late 1940s, the state's political establishment became concerned about the civil rights movement. In response, the state in 1950 created Virginia History and Government Textbook Commission, which was designed 3 history books. Those books set out to inculcate students with what the commission chairman called the Virginia spirit, which basically meant to minimize slavery, glorify the Confederate cause, and discount any notions of racial equality. Some portions of the books were slanted at best. Other parts were simply outright lies, including the first Negroes were treated as indentured servants," end quote. From Cotton Mather in New England to Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia and Thomas Jefferson in Virginia, all believed there were distinct biological and genetic differences between the races. This biology accounted for visual differences such as skin color, hair texture, athleticism, and mathematical ability. In her book, White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo writes, "Jefferson suggested that there were natural differences between the races and asked scientists to find them, illustrating the power of our questions to shape our knowledge, the knowledge we validate. The scientists did not ask, are blacks and others inferior? The question they asked was, why are blacks and others inferior?" In less than a century, Jefferson's suggestion of racial difference became commonly accepted scientific fact, end quote. Now, if I were to ask for a show of hands of those who think that they are racist, I dare say not one single hand would be raised. And I would not have raised my hand either after I read White Fragility. This book has helped me to see that I am a product of my upbringing, culture, socialization, miseducation, and that I have unconscious bias. Those memes are stuck in my head, and I hate those little devils. DiAngelo writes, "I believe that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of color. I define a white progressive as any white person who thinks he or she is not racist or less racist and already gets it. White progressives can be the most difficult for people of color because to the degree that we think that we have arrived, we will put all of our energy into making sure that others see us as having arrived. And D'Angelo is a white woman, so she is speaking to her education and miseducation as well. None of our energy will go into what we need to be doing for the rest of our lives, engaging in ongoing self-awareness, continuing education, relationship building, and actual anti-racist practice. White progressives do indeed uphold and perpetrate racism, but our defensiveness and certitude make it virtually impossible to explain to us how we do so. End quote. My words. If you see it in yourself, name it and start working on it. Bay McNeil, a black journalist living in Japan, writes a column for the Japanese Times called Black Eye. He writes, words like racism have a tendency to shut down conversations and have all parties retreating to their respective foxholes with nothing resolved or meaningful to be addressed, end quote. So we stake out our corners and mentally call out others who we feel are racist without ever looking at our own biases. We feel we can't be racist. After all, we have friends of color. We have nieces or nephews or grandkids who are biracial, and we just love them. D'Angelo tells us that race will influence whether we will survive birth, where we are most likely to live, which schools we will attend, who our friends and partners will be, what careers we will have, how much money we will earn, and that there is a vast difference between what we verbally tell our children and all the other ways that we train them in the racial norms of our culture, end quote. In her book, White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America, Nancy Eisenberg writes, freedom and equality, regardless of religion or class status, were radical new ideas when the United States was formed. Because race is a product of social forces, it has manifested itself along class lines. Poor and working class people were not always perceived as fully white. If poor whites were focused on feeling superior to those below them in status, they were less focused on those above. White people find it very difficult to think about whiteness as a specific state of being that could have an impact on one's life and perceptions. Poor whites are still taught to hate, but not to hate those who are keeping them in line. Lyndon Johnson knew this better than anyone when he quipped, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. Today, we see this with the increased violence toward immigrants, Jews, Muslims, and the Hispanic community. We see this in the form of white supremacy, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and hate-mongering across the web. Pick up any copy of the Intelligence Report magazine published by Southern Poverty Law Center, and you will see just how many hundreds of hate and extremist groups are being tracked. In 2018, the number of hate groups being tracked was 1,020, and that's only the ones that are known. The web is a wonderful place to hide. Now, shifting gears a little bit, if we look at the racial breakdown of people who control our institutions, and these statistics are from 1617, the 10 richest Americans, 100% white. U.S. Congress, 90% white prior to the election, but as of February the 8th, 78% white. U.S. governors, 96% white. Current U.S. presidential cabinet, 91% white. The people who decide TV shows that we see, 93%. Books we read, 90%. The news that's covered, 85% white. What music is produced, the producers, 95% white. Teachers in this country, 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Owners of men's professional football teams, 97% white. 70% players of color. D'Angelo asks us to reflect on these representations, and let's ask ourselves, did your parents tell you that race didn't matter, that everyone was equal? Did they have friends of color? Did many people of color live in your neighborhood? Where did they live? What images, sounds, and smells do you associate with these neighborhoods? What kinds of activities do you think went on there? Might it be dangerous to live there? Were you discouraged from visiting these neighborhoods? Were you discouraged from dating people of a different race? And what about schools? What made a school good? Were the schools in your neighborhood racially segregated? Were their schools considered equal to yours? If there was busing in town, which direction did it go? If you did go to school together, did you sit together in the cafeteria? And if not, why not? Were the honors and advanced placement classes and lower track classes equally racially integrated? Were the teachers of the same race as your own? Did you have a teacher of color before college? D'Angelo writes, racial bias is largely unconscious, and herein lies the deepest challenge, the defensiveness that ensues upon any suggestion of racial bias. It's uncomfortable to be confronted with an aspect of yourself, of ourselves, that we don't like, but we can't change what we refuse to see. She goes on to say, whites enact racism while maintaining a positive self-image in many ways, rationalizing racial segregation as unfortunate but necessary to access good schools, rationalizing that our workplaces are virtually all white because people of color just don't apply or aren't qualified, end quote. Now, I have some questions for you.
Good.
Did your mom ever tell you not to be surprised if you were followed by clerks, especially in high-end stores? Did your parents ever tell you never to talk back or challenge a cop if you were pulled over, to keep your hands on the wheel, look straight ahead, no sudden moves, and answer with the utmost respect? Did she tell you not to be surprised if people make rude remarks because of your hair, your nose, your lips, or your broad hips? Have you been told if you got pulled over for speeding to tweet or text to let friends and family know where you are, just in case something should happen to you? With a strange sounding name, did you ever wonder if you would get an interview and if you got the job, you would be offered less pay? In her book, So You Want to Talk About Race, Iojima Olulu writes, "Did you just call me a racist? How dare you call me a racist? I'm a good person. How dare you? You may now be insisting that you do not have a racist bone in your body, but that is simply not true. You have been a racist and will be a racist in the future, even if less so. You are a racist because you were born and bred in a racist white supremacist society. White supremacy is insidious by design. The racism required to uphold white supremacy is woven into every area of our lives. There is no way you can inherit white privilege from birth, learn racist white supremacist history in schools, consume racist and white supremacist movies and films, work in a racist and white supremacist workforce, and vote for a racist and white supremacist government and not be racist," end quote. Olulu asks us to consider these microaggressions that are perpetrated on people of color and minorities. Are you an affirmative action hire? You aren't like other black people. Wow, you're so articulate. How in the world do you take care of all that hair? Your name is too difficult for me. Do you have a nickname? Is your baby daddy in the picture? Why do black people give their kids such funny names? You are so exotic looking. Do all your kids have the same daddy? Is this a green card marriage? You don't sound black. Wow, I don't believe you can't dance. I thought every black person had rhythm. Are you the nanny? Are you just visiting this neighborhood? Oh, you have a chip on your shoulder. Your accent is adorable. Actually, I was told something like this along the lines when we moved to Richmond. They didn't tell me it was adorable, though. Where are you from? If you're Native American, have you been asked if you grew up in a teepee?
No.
Microaggressions are constant reminders that you don't belong, that you are less than, that you are not worthy of the same respect that white people are afforded, end quote. Stereotypical thinking. Are you guilty? Black people are always late. Light-skinned people of color are more attractive than darker folks and are less threatening. Light-skinned people are likely to be more intelligent than their dark-skinned. If you're walking down the street and a person of color is approaching you, do you hold your purse a little tighter and maybe even cross the street to avoid them? Are you a bit surprised the expert TV commentator of color went to Harvard or Yale or Duke or was a Rhodes Scholar? In a football game, when a player is injured, do you momentarily think the black athlete is tougher and can take pain better than his white teammate? In end zone celebrations and trash talk in NBA games, you wonder, where's his class? What are all these players trying to prove with their tats? Do you find them disgusting and stereotypical? In college basketball, are you appalled by the outrageous hairstyles of the players of color? If you're in business, do you wonder if a person of color gives you a check that it may bounce? Are you a bit surprised when a large purchase on a credit card goes through and is not declined? Have you ever wondered why black people can't be like Asians who come to this country with nothing and make a success, and that you're not oppressed, you're just lazy? Do you think all Jewish people know how to make money? Although you don't know a single Muslim, you paint them with a broad brush, call them towel heads, and think most of them are secretly terrorists? D'Angelo writes, interrupting racism takes courage and intentionality. She suggests several steps that we may take, which include: we try to minimize our defensiveness. We demonstrate our vulnerability. We demonstrate our curiosity and humility. We allow for growth and stretch our worldview. We demonstrate that we practice what we profess to value, and we build authentic relationships and trust with people of color. We interrupt internalized superiority. So where do we go from here? She writes, we must never consider ourselves finished with learning. It's a messy, lifelong process, but one that's necessary to align our values with action. It is also deeply compelling and transformative. Racism is so deeply woven into the fabric of our society that I do not see myself escaping from that continuum in my lifetime. But I can continually seek to move further along. I'm not in a fixed position on my continuum, and my position is dictated by what I am actually doing at any given time. End quote. Now, I expect that this topic will generate a lot of conversation, and hopefully it will, during our polylogue. And today I would like to ask you to speak from a personal point of view. I would like to ask you to keep it rather short so everyone will have a chance to speak, and we will get out before noon. And what I don't want you to do is to tell me that your relatives are so racist you can't stand to be around them, although this may be true, and that you have ditched friends and family because of their racism in politics. You can't fix them, but you can work on fixing you if this is what you wish